I'm Jessica Thompson, and at 31 years old, I thought I understood my place in the world. I was the practical sister, the one who shopped clearance racks and drove a reliable Honda Civic that I'd paid off 3 years early. I was the sister who wore simple makeup, kept her hair in easy styles, and believed that substance mattered more than surface. What I didn't realize was that sometimes the universe has a spectacular way of proving you right when everyone else is trying to prove you wrong. My story begins with a $40 dress and ends with the most expensive lesson my sister Emma ever received. It's about the moment when everything I thought I knew about family loyalty collided with everything my family thought they knew about success. Some people measure worth by designer labels and bank balances, but that sunny Saturday in June taught me that the most valuable thing you can possess is authenticity, even when everyone around you is performing a carefully choreographed lie. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Thompson family dynamics were established long before I was old enough to understand them. Growing up in the comfortable suburbs of Westerville, Ohio, our household operated on an unspoken but deeply understood hierarchy. Emma was the crown jewel, 3 years younger than me, but somehow always positioned as the one who needed protection, guidance, and most importantly, financial investment. I was the responsible older sister, the one who could be counted on to figure things out, make do with less, and never complain about the disparity. Our parents, Linda and Robert Thompson, weren't deliberately cruel people. Dad worked as a middle manager at a local insurance company, steady and reliable, but never particularly ambitious. Mom had given up her teaching career when Emma was born, and never quite found her way back to it. They loved both their daughters, but somewhere along the way, they'd decided that Emma was fragile in a way that required careful tending, while I was sturdy enough to weather any storm. This manifested in countless small ways throughout our childhood. When it was time for school clothes shopping, Emma would get the full day at the mall, trying on outfit after outfit until she found pieces that made her feel special. I would get an efficient 2-hour trip to the department stores, where practicality and durability were the primary concerns. Emma's birthday parties were elaborate affairs with themed decorations and carefully curated guest lists. Mine were simple backyard gatherings with homemade cake and whatever entertainment we could manage. By the time I reached high school, I'd internalized the message that I was the low-maintenance daughter. I found pride in needing less, in being easier to please, in not causing the dramatic upheavals that seemed to follow Emma wherever she went. When Emma couldn't decide between 3 different prom dresses, each costing more than my parents typically spent on my entire wardrobe, I felt superior in my ability to find a beautiful dress at a consignment shop for $30. I excelled academically, not because I was necessarily smarter than Emma, but because I understood that education was going to be my path to independence. Emma floated through school on charm and the assumption that someone would always be there to catch her when she fell. She was genuinely beautiful in that effortless way that some people are blessed with. Tall and willowy with the kind of blonde hair that looked expensive even when she was 12 years old. I was pretty enough, but in a more ordinary way that required effort to shine. College was where our paths truly diverged, though the family patterns remained stubbornly intact. I received a partial scholarship to Ohio State University and worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to cover my remaining expenses. I chose marketing as my major because it seemed practical and versatile, the kind of degree that would lead to steady employment. I lived in the dorms for 1 year, then moved to increasingly affordable off-campus housing as I learned to manage my finances more efficiently. Emma, meanwhile, enrolled at the Columbus College of Art and Design with the vague intention of studying fashion merchandising. The tuition was significantly higher than Ohio State, and she lived in expensive off-campus apartments that our parents supplemented when her part-time retail jobs couldn't cover the rent. She changed her major twice, extended her graduation timeline by a year, and generally approached college as an extended social experiment rather than career preparation. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing and immediately landed an entry-level position at Henderson & Associates, a consulting firm in downtown Columbus. It wasn't glamorous work initially, mostly supporting senior staff with research and client communications. But I was grateful for the steady paycheck and the opportunity to learn from professionals who seemed to have their lives figured out. Emma graduated a year later with a degree in fashion merchandising and a portfolio of connections rather than concrete job prospects. She moved back into her childhood bedroom and took a part-time position at Luxe Boutique in the Short North, Columbus's trendy arts district. The job paid barely above minimum wage, but Emma loved the employee discount and the proximity to the kind of lifestyle she aspired to maintain. This is where our adult relationship truly took shape. I was building a career, slowly but steadily advancing at Henderson & Associates from marketing coordinator to senior coordinator, to my current position overseeing client communications for several major accounts. I rented a modest apartment in Clintonville, furnished it gradually with pieces I could afford, and found genuine satisfaction in my independence. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to exist in a permanent state of becoming. She was always on the verge of a breakthrough, a promotion, an opportunity that would launch her into the lifestyle she felt she deserved. In the meantime, she lived at home, worked part-time, and spent most of her income on maintaining an appearance that suggested much greater financial resources than she actually possessed. Family gatherings became exercises in managing these disparities. Emma would arrive wearing outfits that cost more than I spent on clothing in 6 months, carrying handbags that represented a significant percentage of her monthly income. She would regale us with stories from the boutique, dropping the names of local socialites and business wives who shopped there, positioning herself as connected to a world of influence and affluence. I would arrive in outfits purchased during end-of-season sales, carrying the same leather purse I'd bought 3 years earlier because it was well-made and versatile. I would share updates about work projects and client successes, but somehow, my actual professional achievements seemed less impressive than Emma's proximity to expensive things. The commentary began subtly. Emma would compliment my outfits with phrases like, "That's such a cute, practical choice," or, "I love how you always find such interesting pieces." The word interesting became her favorite way to describe my fashion choices, delivered with a tone that suggested she found them curious rather than admirable. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At family dinners, she would share fashion advice disguised as sisterly concern. "Jessica, you know, if you ever want to update your look, I could totally help you pick out some investment pieces. It's all about building a foundation wardrobe with quality basics." She would explain the difference between various fabric blends, the importance of proper tailoring, the way certain brands held their value over time. Our parents seemed to find these interactions charming, evidence of Emma's developing expertise and sisterly affection. They didn't notice the subtle condescension, or perhaps they chose not to acknowledge it. Dad would nod approvingly when Emma explained why designer shoes were actually more economical in the long run because of their durability. Mom would ask follow-up questions about fashion trends and styling techniques, positioning Emma as the family expert on matters of presentation and style. I began to dread these conversations, not because I was ashamed of my choices, but because they seemed designed to establish a hierarchy where Emma's knowledge of expensive things trumped my knowledge of how to live within my means. I was building a stable, independent life, but somehow that seemed less valuable than Emma's ability to identify luxury brands and explain their significance. The dynamic shifted into higher gear when Emma met David Mitchell at a networking event hosted by the Columbus Young Professionals Association. David was a software engineer at a local tech company, quiet and serious in a way that seemed to complement Emma's more outgoing personality. He was clearly intelligent and dedicated to his work, though he seemed somewhat overwhelmed by Emma's social expectations and expensive tastes. Emma's relationship with David became the new focal point of family conversations. She would describe their dates in elaborate detail, emphasizing the restaurants they visited and the events they attended. David, she explained, worked for a very successful company and was positioned for significant advancement in his career. She was vague about the specific details of his work, but she painted a picture of a young man with substantial earning potential and sophisticated tastes. I met David for the first time at a family barbecue that summer, and I was struck by how different he seemed from Emma's descriptions. He was genuinely nice, asking thoughtful questions about my work and seeming interested in the responses. He appeared somewhat nervous around our family, as though he was being evaluated for a position he wasn't sure he wanted. When Emma would launch into explanations about fashion or lifestyle choices, he would nod politely but look distinctly uncomfortable. There was something about David that reminded me of myself at family gatherings, the sense of being slightly out of step with the performance everyone else was engaged in. When Emma criticized my choice to order a burger instead of the salmon at a restaurant, David actually defended my decision, saying he thought it looked delicious and that he might change his own order. It was a small moment, but it suggested that he didn't share Emma's preoccupation with appearances and status. The engagement happened 6 months later, and suddenly our family conversations became entirely focused on wedding planning. Emma approached the task with the same intensity she brought to everything else, creating elaborate Pinterest boards and spreadsheets tracking every detail from invitations to centerpieces. She had opinions about everything and seemed to view the wedding as the ultimate opportunity to demonstrate her sophisticated taste and attention to detail. The budget discussions happened behind closed doors, but it was clear that Emma's vision exceeded what our parents could realistically afford. Dad would emerge from these conversations looking stressed and tired, while Mom would make vague comments about the importance of starting a marriage off right and making sacrifices for special occasions. Emma, meanwhile, would share updates about finding the perfect dress, booking the ideal venue, and selecting a photographer whose work was featured in local bridal magazines. David's role in these conversations seemed strangely peripheral. Emma would consult him on major decisions, but she clearly saw herself as the primary architect of their wedding day. When family members asked David about his preferences, he would defer to Emma with comments like, "She has much better taste than I do," or "I just want her to be happy." There was something resigned about his responses, as though he had accepted that his opinions were less important than maintaining harmony. I found myself feeling protective of David during these conversations, though I couldn't quite articulate why. Perhaps it was because I recognized something of myself in his position, the experience of being overshadowed by Emma's more dramatic personality. He seemed like a fundamentally decent person who was trying to navigate expectations that didn't quite align with his own values or comfort level. The wedding planning intensified over the winter months, with Emma scheduling appointments for dress fittings, cake tastings, and venue tours that became family events requiring everyone's input and enthusiasm. I participated dutifully, offering opinions when asked, and trying to be supportive despite my growing concern about the financial pressure I could see building in our parents' faces. Emma's dress selection process alone took 3 months and visits to 4 different bridal boutiques. She would model options for our family, explaining the differences in fabric quality, construction techniques, and designer reputations. The dress she ultimately selected cost more than I had spent on my car, but Emma explained that it was an investment in memories that would last a lifetime. The pressure on me to upgrade my own appearance for the wedding began early in the planning process. Emma would make casual comments about the importance of looking appropriate for professional photography, the way different colors would complement her chosen palette, the significance of presenting a cohesive family image. She offered to take me shopping for a dress, suggesting that she could help me find something that would photograph well and reflect the sophistication of the occasion. I appreciated the offer but declined, explaining that I preferred to shop for myself and that I already had ideas about what I wanted to wear. Emma's response was a barely concealed look of concern, followed by comments about hoping I would consider the formality of the venue and the quality of the photography when making my selection. The truth was, I had already found the perfect dress during a weekend shopping trip to Target. It was a navy blue wrap dress with 3/4 sleeves, elegant in its simplicity, and flattering in ways that more expensive options I had tried on were not. The price tag was $40, but the dress looked and felt like something that cost much more. I felt confident and comfortable wearing it, which seemed more important than meeting anyone else's expectations about appropriate wedding guest attire. I didn't mention the price or the store to Emma, sensing that she would find both details problematic. Instead, I simply assured her that I had found something appropriate and that she didn't need to worry about my contribution to the family, photos. This seemed to satisfy her temporarily, though she continued to make subtle references to the importance of dressing appropriately for such a significant occasion. As the wedding date approached, the tension in our family seemed to ratchet higher with each passing week. Dad was working extra hours to cover the mounting expenses. Mom was managing increasingly complex logistics, and Emma was oscillating between excitement and stress about every remaining detail. David, meanwhile, seemed to retreat further into himself, spending long hours at work and appearing exhausted during family dinners. I tried to be helpful without getting drawn into the drama, offering to handle specific tasks and providing emotional support when needed. But I also began to feel a growing sense of unease about the dynamics I was witnessing. Emma's preoccupation with appearances seemed to be intensifying rather than diminishing, and her comments about my choices were becoming more frequent and pointed. The week before the wedding, Emma called me with what she described as an important conversation about the upcoming celebration. Her tone was serious, almost businesslike, as she explained that she had been thinking about the photography and the overall presentation of the wedding party. She wondered if I had given sufficient thought to my outfit choice and whether I might benefit from her guidance in selecting something more appropriate for such a significant occasion. I assured her that I was comfortable with my choice and that she didn't need to worry about how I would look in the photos. This response seemed to frustrate her, and she pressed further, asking specific questions about where I had purchased my dress and how much I had spent on the overall outfit. When I deflected these questions, she became more direct about her concerns. The conversation revealed the depth of Emma's anxiety about maintaining control over every aspect of her wedding day, including the appearance of family members. She seemed genuinely worried that my fashion choices would somehow diminish the overall quality of the celebration, as though my presence in a dress that didn't meet her standards would be visible evidence of our family's inability to rise to the occasion. I ended the conversation feeling sad rather than angry, recognizing that Emma's preoccupation with appearances was really about her own insecurities and need for validation. But I also felt determined not to allow her anxiety to dictate my choices, or undermine my confidence in my own judgment about what was appropriate and beautiful. The night before the wedding, I hung my navy blue dress in the closet and laid out the simple jewelry and comfortable heels I planned to wear with it. I felt good about my choices and excited to celebrate Emma and David's marriage, despite the undercurrent of tension that had been building for months. I had no way of knowing that the next 24 hours would fundamentally change our family dynamics and my understanding of my place within them. Looking back now, I can see that everything that happened at the wedding was the inevitable result of patterns that had been developing for years. Emma's need to establish herself as superior in matters of taste and sophistication, our parents' willingness to enable her sense of entitlement, and my own tendency to absorb criticism rather than challenge it directly had created a dynamic that was unsustainable. But on that Friday evening, as I prepared for what I expected to be a beautiful celebration of my sister's marriage, I was simply hoping to make it through the weekend without any major family drama. I wanted to be supportive, to look appropriate in the photos, and to genuinely enjoy watching Emma marry someone who seemed to care about her deeply. I had no idea that my $40 dress was about to become the most expensive lesson my sister would ever receive about the difference between true class and the performance of wealth. The stage was set for a revelation that would change everything we thought we knew about success, status, and the real meaning of family loyalty. Saturday. Morning arrived with the kind of perfect June weather that wedding planners dream about. The sun was shining, but not oppressive. There was a gentle breeze that would keep the outdoor ceremony comfortable, and the forecast promised clear skies through the evening reception. I woke up in my Clintonville apartment feeling genuinely excited about the day ahead, despite all the undercurrents of tension that had been building over the past few months. My husband Michael was already up, making coffee in our small kitchen while scrolling through emails on his phone. Even on weekends, he often checked in on work situations, though he was careful not to let it dominate our personal time. Michael worked in corporate development, a role that required him to be available for urgent matters, but also gave him significant flexibility in managing his schedule. We had been married for 2 years, having met through mutual friends at a casual dinner party where we discovered a shared love of hiking and an appreciation for quiet evenings at home. Michael was everything I valued in a partner: intelligent, kind, supportive of my career ambitions, and completely uninterested in the kind of social climbing that seemed to occupy so much of Emma's energy. He loved me for who I was, not for how I might enhance his image or social standing. Michael knew about the family dynamics, of course. He had observed Emma's behavior at family gatherings with the kind of bemused detachment that comes from not being emotionally invested in long-standing patterns. He found her preoccupation with appearances somewhat puzzling, but tried to be diplomatic in his responses when I vented about particularly frustrating interactions. This morning, as I got ready for Emma's wedding, Michael was being especially supportive. He complimented my navy blue dress when I put it on, telling me I looked beautiful and elegant. He helped me choose between 2 different pairs of earrings, selecting the simple pearl studs that complemented the dress's classic lines. When I expressed a moment of doubt about whether my outfit was formal enough, he reminded me that true elegance came from confidence and authenticity, not from price tags. The Grand Event Center in Dublin was about a 20-minute drive from our apartment, and we arrived early enough to help with any last-minute preparations that might be needed. The venue was exactly what Emma had wanted: sophisticated, spacious, and designed to photograph beautifully. The ceremony would take place in a garden pavilion overlooking a small lake, while the reception would be held in an elegant ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers. Emma had chosen her wedding party carefully, selecting friends who shared her sense of style and attention to detail. Her bridesmaids were women she had met through work at the boutique or through David's social circle, all of them polished and put together in ways that suggested significant investment in their appearances. The dresses she had chosen for them were expensive, in a soft lavender shade that complemented the overall color scheme she had planned for months. I found Emma in the bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids, makeup artists, and photographers documenting every moment of her preparation. She looked absolutely stunning in her wedding gown, which was everything she had described and more. The dress was a masterpiece of construction and design, with intricate beadwork and a silhouette that showed off her figure perfectly. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo that had taken 2 hours to complete, and her makeup was flawless in the way that only professional application can achieve. When Emma saw me enter the room, her face lit up with genuine happiness. For a moment, all the tension and competition fell away, and she was simply my little sister getting married to someone she loved. She hugged me carefully, mindful of her dress and makeup, and thanked me for being there. It was a sweet moment that reminded me why I cared so much about maintaining our relationship despite its complications. The photographers captured our interaction, and I felt grateful that those photos would show the love between us rather than the friction that had been building over recent months. Emma's happiness was infectious, and I found myself getting caught up in the excitement of the day despite my reservations about some of the choices that had led to this moment. David was getting ready in a different part of the venue, but Emma had arranged for a private first-look photo session where they would see each other before the ceremony. The logistics of wedding photography were complex, requiring careful timing and coordination to capture all the important moments while maintaining the flow of the celebration. As the morning progressed, I helped where I could without getting in the way of the professional team Emma had hired to manage every detail. I assisted with small tasks like distributing boutonnieres to the groomsmen and making sure the guest book was positioned correctly at the entrance to the ceremony space. These were the kinds of practical contributions I was good at, the behind-the-scenes work that kept events running smoothly. Michael had been assigned to help with parking coordination, ensuring that elderly relatives had spots close to the venue entrance and that the photographers had clear access for capturing arrivals. He approached the task with his typical efficiency and attention to detail, making sure everyone felt welcomed and taken care of from the moment they arrived. The guest list included about 150 people, a mix of family members, Emma's friends from work and college, David's colleagues and childhood friends, and family friends who had known both Emma and me since we were children. It was the kind of gathering that represented the merging of two lives and two families, with all the complexity that such occasions inevitably involve. I recognized most of the arriving guests, though there were some faces I didn't know, presumably David's work colleagues and friends from other parts of his life. Emma had mentioned that several important people from David's company would be attending, though she had been characteristically vague about the details of his professional relationships. As the ceremony time approached, I took my place with the other family members in the front rows of seating. The setting was truly beautiful, with the late spring flowers in full bloom and the lake providing a serene backdrop for the exchange of vows. Emma had chosen every detail carefully, from the music selection to the arrangement of chairs, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and romantic. David looked handsome and nervous as he took his place at the altar, flanked by his groomsmen and the officiant they had selected. His family was seated on the opposite side of the aisle from ours, and I could see the pride and emotion on his parents' faces as they prepared to watch their son get married. When the music began and Emma started her walk down the aisle, she was absolutely radiant. All the months of planning and preparation had culminated in this moment, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew she looked perfect. Our father escorted her with obvious pride, and our mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as she watched her younger daughter approach this major milestone. The ceremony itself was beautiful and heartfelt. Emma and David had written their own vows, expressing their love and commitment in words that felt genuine and personal. David's voice was steady as he spoke about his gratitude for finding Emma and his excitement about building a life together. Emma's vows were more elaborate, touching on their shared dreams and her appreciation for David's support of her ambitions. As I watched them exchange rings and kiss as husband and wife, I felt genuinely happy for them despite all the complications that had led to this day. Love was love, and whatever challenges they might face in the future, this moment was about their commitment to each other and their hope for a shared future. The cocktail hour that followed the ceremony was held on a terrace overlooking the lake, with servers circulating among the guests offering drinks and appetizers. Emma and David spent time greeting their guests and posing for photos, while the rest of us mingled and celebrated their union. This was when I first began to notice the subtle comments about my appearance. Emma's college friends, who had known her during her fashion merchandising studies, seemed particularly focused on evaluating everyone's outfit choices. I overheard conversations about designers, boutiques, and the cost of various accessories, discussions that felt more like competitions than casual observations. One of Emma's bridesmaids approached me during the cocktail hour, introducing herself as Madison and mentioning that she worked at a high-end boutique in the Short North District. She complimented my dress in a way that felt like a question, saying it was such an interesting choice and asking where I had found it. When I mentioned that I had purchased it at Target, her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, as though she was recategorizing me based on this new information. The conversation that followed was polite but pointed, with Madison sharing details about her own dress and accessories that emphasized their designer origins and significant cost. She spoke about the importance of investment pieces and the way quality fabrics and construction justified higher prices, delivering what felt like a gentle lecture disguised as friendly advice. I found these interactions exhausting but tried to remain gracious, recognizing that Madison and the other bridesmaids were reflecting the values and priorities that Emma had been emphasizing for months. They weren't necessarily trying to be unkind, but they had clearly absorbed the message that clothing choices were meaningful indicators of taste, sophistication, and social status. Michael noticed my discomfort and smoothly redirected conversations when they became too focused on material possessions and brand names. He had a gift for asking people about their work, their hobbies, and their relationships with Emma and David, shifting the focus away from superficial topics and toward more substantial connections. Emma herself seemed to be in her element during the cocktail hour, moving gracefully among her guests and clearly enjoying the admiration her appearance was generating. She had achieved exactly the kind of elegant, sophisticated celebration she had been planning for months, and the positive feedback she was receiving validated all the time and money that had been invested in creating this experience. David appeared more relaxed than he had during the ceremony, though I noticed he seemed somewhat overwhelmed by the social demands of greeting so many people and making small talk with guests he didn't know well. Emma stayed close to him during most interactions, guiding conversations and helping him navigate the complex social dynamics of their combined guest list. As the cocktail hour continued, I began to overhear fragments of conversations about my appearance that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Emma's friends seemed to be conducting a subtle evaluation of all the wedding guests, commenting on outfit choices and making observations about who had clearly invested in their appearance and who had not. My navy blue dress, which I loved and felt confident wearing, was apparently being discussed as an example of someone who didn't understand the significance of the occasion. The comments weren't loud enough to be obviously rude, but they were, clearly intended to be overheard by anyone paying attention. One conversation I caught involved two of Emma's boutique colleagues discussing the importance of dressing appropriately for formal occasions and the way certain outfit choices could detract from the overall elegance of an event. They mentioned specific examples of guests whose clothing seemed budget or off the rack, in ways that suggested a lack of understanding about proper wedding guest etiquette. I realized that I was likely one of the examples they were discussing, though they were careful not to be explicitly direct about their targets. The conversation felt calculated to make certain guests feel self-conscious about their choices while reinforcing the social hierarchy that Emma seemed determined to establish. Michael was engaged in a conversation with some of David's work colleagues when I rejoined him, and I was struck by how different the tone was compared to the interactions I had been having with Emma's friends. David's colleagues were discussing a recent project their company had completed, sharing details about the technical challenges they had overcome and the satisfaction of delivering results that exceeded their clients' expectations. The conversation was substantive and engaging, focused on professional accomplishments and problem-solving rather than superficial evaluations of appearance and status. Michael was clearly enjoying the discussion, and I could see why he and David might have developed a good working relationship if they were indeed colleagues at the same company. One of David's friends mentioned that their company had recently been recognized for its innovative approach to client solutions, crediting the leadership team for creating an environment where creativity and collaboration could flourish. He spoke specifically about how the company's executives were known for their integrity and their commitment to supporting employees' professional development. As the cocktail hour wound down and we prepared to move into the reception space, Emma appeared at my side with a bright smile and what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm about the success of the celebration so far. She thanked me for being there and for all the help I had provided in the months leading up to the wedding. But then, as we were walking toward the ballroom, Emma made a comment that shattered the temporary peace I had been feeling. She leaned close to me and said, with what appeared to be sisterly concern, that she hoped I was enjoying myself despite what she called my unique fashion choices. She went on to suggest that while she appreciated my individuality, she wondered if I might have considered the significance of the occasion when selecting my outfit. She mentioned that the photographers had been taking candid shots throughout the cocktail hour, and that she hoped the family photos would reflect the elegance she had worked so hard to create. The comment was delivered with a smile and a tone that suggested loving concern, but the message was clear. My appearance was somehow falling short of the standards she had set for her wedding day. Emma was politely but unmistakably telling me that my presence was detracting from the sophisticated image she wanted to project. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment and hurt, but I managed to respond calmly that I felt appropriate and comfortable in my outfit choice. Emma's smile faltered slightly, and she said something about hoping the professional photos would turn out well, despite the mixed levels of formality among the family members. As we entered the beautifully decorated ballroom, I realized that the real drama of the evening was just beginning. Emma had spent months planning every detail of this celebration, but she had apparently also spent considerable time thinking about how to establish and maintain the social hierarchy she believed should define our family relationships. The reception space was stunning, with round tables covered in elegant linens and centerpieces that perfectly complemented the color scheme Emma had chosen. The lighting was warm and flattering. The band was setting up for dancing later in the evening, and everything looked exactly as Emma had envisioned it during her months of careful planning. But as I took my seat at the family table, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to become an unwilling participant in a performance I didn't understand and hadn't agreed to join. Emma had created the perfect setting for her perfect wedding, and apparently, my imperfect appearance was threatening the overall effect she had worked so hard to achieve. The reception ballroom was everything Emma had dreamed it would be. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across tables adorned with white linens and elaborate floral centerpieces featuring white roses, eucalyptus, and touches of lavender to match the bridesmaids' dresses. The band was positioned on a small stage at one end of the room, while the opposite end featured a sweetheart table where Emma and David would sit, elevated slightly so all the guests could see the happy couple throughout the dinner service. I found myself seated at the family table with Michael, our parents, David's parents, and a few close relatives from both sides. The seating arrangement had been carefully planned by Emma, who had spent considerable time creating a chart that would facilitate conversation while maintaining what she considered appropriate social groupings. I noticed that many of David's work colleagues were seated together at tables near the center of the room, while Emma's boutique friends and college acquaintances occupied prime real estate closer to the head table. The dinner service began with a champagne toast led by David's father, a warm and genuine speech about welcoming Emma into their family and expressing confidence in the young couple's future together. Mr. Mitchell spoke about watching David grow into the man he had become and how pleased they were to see him find someone who brought out his best qualities. His words were heartfelt and unpretentious, focusing on character and compatibility rather than social status or material success. Emma glowed throughout the speech, clearly pleased with the formal recognition of her new place in the Mitchell family. She had positioned herself perfectly for the professional photographer, who was capturing every moment of the formal proceedings. The attention was everything she had hoped for, and her happiness seemed genuine as she basked in the celebration that had been months in the planning. The meal itself was excellent, featuring the upscale menu Emma had selected after numerous tastings and consultations with the catering staff. She had chosen dishes that would photograph beautifully while appealing to a range of tastes, creating an experience that balanced sophistication with accessibility. The presentation was flawless, each plate arranged with the kind of attention to detail that reflected the overall quality of the celebration. During the dinner service, I had the opportunity to observe more of the social dynamics that Emma had, carefully orchestrated. Her friends from the boutique were engaged in animated conversations about fashion trends, upcoming events in Columbus's social scene, and various people they knew from their retail connections. The discussions felt performative, designed to demonstrate their insider knowledge and cultural sophistication. Meanwhile, David's colleagues were having more substantive conversations about their work, current events, and shared interests outside of professional obligations. I found myself drawn to their discussions, which felt more genuine and intellectually engaging than the status-focused chatter happening at other tables around the room. Michael was thoroughly enjoying himself, having discovered that several of David's co-workers shared his interest in hiking and outdoor activities. They were making plans for a group camping trip later in the summer, discussing trails they had explored and equipment recommendations. It was the kind of easy camaraderie that forms naturally when people discover genuine common interests. As the dinner plates were cleared and the formal program began, Emma stood to thank everyone for celebrating with them. Her speech was polished and gracious, acknowledging different groups of guests and expressing appreciation for the love and support they had received throughout their engagement. She looked radiant as she spoke, clearly in her element as the center of attention at such an elegant affair. David's response was more understated, but equally heartfelt. He thanked the guests for their presence and spoke about how meaningful it was to have their families and friends witness this important moment. He mentioned how grateful he was for the warm welcome he had received from the Thompson family, and how excited he was about building a life with Emma. Then came the moment that would change everything, though none of us could have anticipated. What was about to unfold? David cleared his throat and continued speaking, his voice taking on a slightly more formal tone as he transitioned to what appeared to be additional acknowledgments. "Before we continue with the celebration," he said, "I want to take a moment to recognize some very special guests who have made tonight possible in ways that go beyond just being here to celebrate with us." Emma looked puzzled but continued, smiling, clearly expecting David to mention specific relatives or close friends who had been particularly helpful during the wedding planning process. The room grew quiet as guests focused their attention on David's words, anticipating the kind of gracious acknowledgments that were typical of wedding reception speeches. "Emma and I are incredibly fortunate to work for companies that value work-life balance and have been supportive of our relationship from the beginning," David continued. "In particular, I want to acknowledge my colleagues and supervisors who have not only been understanding about wedding planning logistics, but have also become genuine friends who were honored to have celebrating with us tonight." He paused, scanning the room with his eyes until they settled on our table. "I'm especially grateful to have my boss and his wife here tonight. Their support has meant everything to me, both professionally and personally, and I can't imagine celebrating this milestone without them here to share it with us." The room remained attentive but relaxed, assuming David was about to point out his supervisor and offer the kind of respectful acknowledgement that ambitious young employees often made at important personal events. Emma's expression showed mild interest mixed with a touch of impatience, as though she was ready for David to conclude his remarks so the celebration could continue. David smiled warmly and gestured toward our table. "I'd like to ask Robert Henderson, the CEO of Henderson & Associates, and his wife Jessica to stand so everyone can properly meet them." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. I felt Michael's hand gently touch my elbow, encouraging me to stand, though my mind was still processing what David had just said. Slowly, almost mechanically, I rose from my chair, with Michael standing beside me. The room erupted in polite applause, but the sound seemed to come from a great distance as I watched Emma's face cycle through a series of expressions. First confusion, then disbelief, then a growing horror as the implications of David's announcement became clear. Her sister, the one she had been subtly mocking throughout the cocktail hour for her budget fashion choices and lack of sophistication, was married to David's boss. Not just any boss, but the CEO of the company where David worked and clearly hoped to advance his career. The applause continued as guests turned to look at us, many of them David's colleagues who were clearly pleased to see their company's leadership being recognized at such a personal celebration. Some of them were smiling with genuine warmth, apparently familiar with Michael's reputation as a supportive and fair employer. I managed to smile and acknowledge the recognition with a gracious nod, though I could feel my cheeks burning with a complex mixture of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated after the subtle humiliations I had endured throughout the day, but a larger part felt genuinely sorry for Emma, whose carefully constructed social hierarchy had just collapsed in the most public way possible. Michael handled the moment with his typical grace, offering a brief wave to the room before we both sat down. His expression remained pleasantly neutral, though I could see the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he was beginning to understand the dynamics that had been playing out throughout the celebration. David continued his speech, apparently unaware of the bombshell he had just dropped on his new wife. Robert has been an incredible mentor to me, and Jessica has been equally welcoming whenever our paths have crossed at company events. Having them here tonight makes this celebration even more meaningful. Emma had somehow managed to maintain her smile, though it looked frozen in place as she processed what had just happened. The photographer was still capturing every moment, and she was clearly aware that her reaction would be preserved forever in their wedding album. As David concluded his remarks and the formal program moved on to other speakers, I could see Emma struggling to regain her composure. She was still seated at the head table, elevated above the rest of the room, making it impossible for her to have a private conversation with David about what she had just learned. The irony was devastating in its completeness. Emma had spent months positioning herself as the sophisticated sister with superior taste and social connections. She had criticized my fashion choices, questioned my understanding of appropriate formal wear, and made subtle but pointed comments about the importance of presenting oneself properly at significant social events. All of this criticism had been delivered to her sister, who was married to her new husband's boss, the person who would ultimately have significant influence over David's career trajectory and their financial future. The power dynamic she thought she understood had been completely inverted in a matter of seconds. I watched as Emma's mind worked through the implications of this revelation. Every comment she had made about my interesting fashion choices, every suggestion that I didn't understand the importance of quality clothing, every subtle put-down about my lack of sophistication now took on a completely different meaning. The guests who had witnessed her earlier comments about my appearance were now processing the same information, realizing that the woman Emma had been subtly criticizing was actually in a position of significant social and professional influence. Some of them looked uncomfortable, clearly remembering conversations that now seemed inappropriate and potentially embarrassing. Michael leaned over to whisper in my ear, "I'm starting to understand why you seemed tense about today." His tone was gentle but suggested that he was beginning to piece together the undercurrents that had been affecting my mood throughout the celebration. I nodded slightly, not trusting myself to speak without revealing the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. The vindication felt hollow because it came at the expense of Emma's public humiliation, something I had never wanted despite the frustration I had felt about her behavior. The next speaker was Emma's maid of honor, who offered a heartfelt tribute to Emma's friendship and expressed confidence in her future happiness with David. The speech provided a welcome distraction from the tension that was still radiating from the head table, where Emma was clearly struggling to process what she had just learned. David, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the impact his announcement had made. He was smiling and nodding along with the maid of honor's speech, apparently pleased that he had properly acknowledged the important people in his professional life. His innocence in the moment was almost painful to watch, knowing that he would soon have to deal with Emma's reaction to this unexpected revelation. As the formal speeches concluded and the band prepared to start the dancing portion of the evening, Emma finally had the opportunity to lean over and speak privately with David. Even from across the room, I could see the intensity of their whispered conversation and the growing confusion on David's face as Emma explained the significance of what had just happened. The first dance was scheduled to begin in a few minutes, and Emma was clearly trying to maintain her composure for the photographers and guests who would be watching this traditional romantic moment. But the strain was beginning to show around. Her eyes and her smile looked increasingly forced as she processed the complete reversal of everything she thought she knew about her family's social standing. I found myself feeling genuinely sorry for Emma, despite everything that had transpired throughout the day. She had worked so hard to create the perfect wedding celebration, carefully managing every detail to project an image of sophistication and success. The revelation that her target for criticism was actually in a position of influence had undermined the entire foundation of her social calculations. Michael was observing the situation with the kind of analytical detachment that served him well in his professional role. "This is quite a family dynamic," he murmured, his tone suggesting both sympathy and a growing understanding of why I had been so anxious about the day's events. The band leader announced that it was time for the first dance, and Emma and David moved to the center of the dance floor. They had chosen a classic romantic song and had taken lessons to ensure they would look graceful and confident during this highlight moment of their reception. As they danced, Emma managed to summon a genuine smile, losing herself momentarily in the romance of the moment and the culmination of months of planning and anticipation. David held her tenderly, clearly, moved by the significance of the occasion and unaware of the internal struggle his wife was experiencing. The guests watched with warm appreciation as the couple moved together, their happiness evident despite the undercurrent of tension that had been building throughout the evening. The photographers captured every angle of their dance, creating images that would preserve this moment long after the complexities of the day had been forgotten. When the song ended and other couples were invited to join them on the dance floor, Michael extended his hand to me with a gentle smile. "Shall we?" he asked, offering me the chance to participate in this traditional celebration despite the awkwardness of the situation. We moved onto the dance floor along with Emma and David's parents and several other couples, creating the kind of warm, familial scene that Emma had envisioned when planning her reception. The music was beautiful, the setting was elegant, and for a few minutes, it was possible to focus on the celebration rather than the personal drama that had been unfolding. As we danced, Michael spoke quietly in my ear. "I'm beginning to understand why you've been so stressed about family gatherings. This must have been building for a while." I nodded, grateful for his perceptive support, but still processing my own complex emotions about what had just transpired. The vindication I felt was tempered by genuine concern for Emma and recognition that family relationships were far more complicated than simple questions of right and wrong. The evening was far from over, and I suspected that the most challenging conversations were still ahead of us. Emma would need time to process what she had learned. David would need to understand the implications for his relationship with both his wife and his professional environment. And our family would need to navigate the new dynamics that had been revealed in such a public and dramatic way. But for now, we danced together in the beautiful ballroom Emma had chosen so carefully, surrounded by family and friends who were celebrating love and commitment despite the personal complications that made such occasions both meaningful and challenging. The remainder of the evening unfolded with a surreal quality that I had never experienced before. Emma managed to maintain her role as the gracious bride, accepting congratulations and participating in the traditional wedding activities. But I could see the strain in her posture and the careful way she avoided making direct eye contact with me. The cake-cutting ceremony proceeded as planned, with Emma and David feeding each other small bites while the photographer captured the playful moment. Emma's laugh sounded genuine, though I noticed she gripped David's hand more tightly than necessary, as though anchoring herself to the one stable element in her suddenly shifting world. David, meanwhile, seemed to be gradually understanding that something significant had transpired during his speech. I watched him scanning the room with a more observant eye, noting the subtle changes in how guests were interacting with both Emma and me. His colleagues from Henderson and Associates were treating me with a level of deference that must have seemed puzzling, given how Emma had been positioning me throughout the celebration. The dancing continued throughout the evening, with the band, playing a mix of classic wedding songs and contemporary hits that kept multiple generations on the dance floor. Emma had clearly spent considerable time selecting music that would appeal to their diverse guest list, while maintaining the sophisticated atmosphere she wanted for her reception. During a brief lull in the festivities, while Emma was occupied with a group photo session involving her college sorority sisters, David approached our table with an expression that suggested he was beginning to piece together the complexity of the situation he had unknowingly created. "Michael, Jessica," he said, his voice carrying a formality that hadn't been present earlier in the evening. "I wanted to thank you again for being here tonight. I hope my speech didn't put you in an uncomfortable position." Michael responded, with his characteristic diplomacy, assuring David that the acknowledgement had been both appropriate and appreciated. "It's always meaningful when personal and professional relationships intersect in positive ways," he said, offering David an easy way to navigate what was clearly becoming a delicate social situation. David nodded gratefully, then hesitated before continuing. "I'm realizing that I may not have fully understood some of the family dynamics before tonight. I hope I haven't inadvertently caused any awkwardness." The understatement was so significant that I almost smiled despite the emotional complexity of the moment. David was clearly a thoughtful person who was beginning to recognize that his innocent acknowledgement had revealed information that changed everything about how the evening's interactions should be understood. "Family dynamics are always complicated," I replied gently, trying to give him reassurance without going into details that would make the situation more uncomfortable than it already was. "The important thing is that you and Emma are happy, and it's clear that you both are." David's relief was visible, though I could see him mentally reviewing the evening's events and probably cringing at some of the comments he had witnessed about my appearance and fashion choices. He excused himself to rejoin Emma for more photographs, but not before expressing genuine appreciation for what he called our understanding and discretion. As the evening progressed, I noticed subtle shifts in how various guests were interacting with me. Emma's boutique friends, who had been so focused on evaluating everyone's outfit choices earlier in the day, now seemed uncertain about how to position themselves in conversations that involved me. Their earlier commentary about appropriate wedding attire and the importance of investment pieces had taken on an entirely different meaning now that they understood my actual social and professional position. One particularly awkward moment occurred when Madison, the bridesmaid who had questioned me so pointedly about my Target dress during the cocktail hour, approached me near the dessert table with what appeared to be a carefully prepared apology. "Jessica," she began, her voice carrying a nervousness that hadn't been present in our earlier interaction. "I wanted to say how lovely you look tonight. That dress is absolutely perfect for the occasion." The reversal was so complete and so obviously motivated by social calculation rather than genuine appreciation that I felt more sad than vindicated. Madison's change in attitude perfectly illustrated the superficiality of the value system that Emma had been trying so hard to uphold throughout the wedding planning process. "Thank you," I replied simply, choosing not to acknowledge the dramatic shift in her assessment of the same dress she had been subtly criticizing just hours earlier. "Emma has planned such a beautiful celebration. She should be very proud of how everything has come together." Madison nodded enthusiastically, clearly grateful that I was choosing to focus on positive aspects of the evening, rather than highlighting the inconsistency in her behavior. She quickly excused herself to rejoin the other bridesmaids, but not before offering what sounded like a genuine invitation to visit her boutique for a professional styling consultation. The irony was not lost on me that my supposed fashion shortcomings had transformed into sophisticated, understated elegance in the span of a single speech. The same navy blue Target dress that had been deemed inappropriate for such a formal occasion was now being praised as perfectly appropriate and elegantly chosen. Michael observed these interactions with growing understanding of the social dynamics that had been affecting my relationship with Emma for years. During a quiet moment when we were both standing near the windows overlooking the lake, He shared his perspective on what he had witnessed throughout the day. "I'm beginning to understand why family gatherings have been stressful for you," he said, his tone thoughtful rather than critical. "It seems like there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about relative social positions that's been affecting how people treat you." His observation was tactful but accurate. Emma's entire approach to our relationship had been based on assumptions about economic status, professional success, and social influence that were completely incorrect. She had positioned herself as the sophisticated sister who needed to guide and educate me about appropriate choices, when in reality, our circumstances were far more complicated than she had understood. The most poignant moment of the evening came near the end of the reception, when Emma finally had an opportunity to approach me directly for the first time since David's revelation. The other guests were beginning to gather their belongings and offer final congratulations to the couple, creating enough distraction for Emma to speak with me privately. She looked exhausted beneath her carefully maintained makeup, the emotional toll of the evening finally becoming visible despite her determination to maintain appearances. When she spoke, her voice was quieter and more vulnerable than I had heard it in years. "Jessica," she began, then stopped, apparently struggling to find words that could adequately address the complexity of what had transpired. "I need to apologize. I had no idea about Michael's position, about your circumstances. I've been incredibly presumptuous and probably very hurtful." The apology was more direct and comprehensive than I had expected, suggesting that Emma had spent considerable time during the evening reflecting on the implications of her behavior. She seemed genuinely mortified by the realization that her comments about my fashion choices and supposed lack of sophistication had been directed toward someone who was actually in a position of considerable social and professional influence. "I don't know what to say about the way I've been treating you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was being helpful, sharing what I knew about fashion and style, but I realize now that I was being condescending and presumptuous. I'm so sorry." The moment felt like a genuine breakthrough in our relationship, the first time Emma had acknowledged the impact of her behavior, rather than defending her intentions or minimizing the effect of her words. Her distress seemed authentic, motivated by genuine regret rather than social embarrassment about being caught in inappropriate behavior. "Emma," I said gently, choosing my words carefully because I could see how fragile she was feeling. "I appreciate the apology. I know you weren't trying to be deliberately hurtful, but it has been difficult to constantly feel like my choices were being evaluated and found lacking." She nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes despite her efforts to maintain control. "I think I was projecting my own insecurities about not having achieved what you have. Instead of being proud of my sister's success, I was trying to find ways to feel superior in areas where I thought I had more knowledge or better taste." The insight was remarkably perceptive and suggested that Emma had been doing some serious self-reflection throughout the evening. She was acknowledging not just the inappropriate nature of her comments, but the underlying psychological dynamics that had motivated her behavior. "I want to do better," she said, her voice growing stronger as she continued. "I want to be the kind of sister who celebrates your success instead of trying to diminish it. I want to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than competition." The conversation felt like the beginning of a genuine transformation in our dynamic, though I knew that changing years of established patterns would require ongoing effort from both of us. Emma's willingness to acknowledge her behavior and commit to change was encouraging, but rebuilding trust would take time and consistent follow-through. David approached us as our conversation was concluding, his expression showing both concern for Emma's emotional state and curiosity about what we had been discussing. Emma quickly composed herself and took his hand, clearly drawing strength from his presence. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone gentle but alert to the undercurrents of emotion that were still present despite our efforts to resolve the tension. Privately. "We're working through some family stuff," Emma replied, managing a genuine smile that suggested relief at having addressed the situation directly. Just clearing the air about some misunderstandings. David nodded, apparently satisfied that whatever had been troubling Emma was being addressed constructively. His relief was visible, probably because he had been worried about the long-term implications of the inadvertent bombshell he had dropped during his speech. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Emma and David positioned themselves near the entrance to thank everyone for celebrating with them. The farewell process gave them opportunities to have final conversations with their most important guests, including family members and close friends who had traveled significant distances to attend the wedding. When Michael and I approached for our farewell, Emma hugged me with genuine warmth for the first time all day. The embrace felt different from the careful, performance-oriented interactions that had characterized most of our exchanges throughout the celebration. "Thank you for being here," she said, her voice carrying none of the condescension that had marked her earlier comments. "And thank you for being so gracious about everything, especially when I didn't deserve it." David shook hands with Michael with obvious respect and gratitude, clearly understanding now that their professional relationship would continue to be important as he advanced in his career. "I hope we'll see you both soon, under less formal circumstances," he said with a smile that suggested genuine pleasure at the prospect of future social interactions. As Michael and I walked to our car in the parking lot, I felt a complex mixture of emotions about how the evening had concluded. The vindication of having my worth recognized was gratifying, but it felt hollow because it had come at the expense of Emma's public embarrassment. The apology and apparent breakthrough in our relationship was encouraging, but I knew that real change would require ongoing effort and commitment from both of us. "How are you feeling about everything?" Michael asked as we drove home through the quiet suburban streets of Dublin. His question was gentle but perceptive, recognizing that I needed to process the emotional complexity of what had transpired. "Relieved, I think," I replied after considering the question seriously. Not because Emma was embarrassed, but because the truth is finally out there. It's been exhausting to constantly feel like I was being judged and found wanting by someone who didn't actually understand the full picture of my life. Michael nodded thoughtfully. "It must have been particularly difficult because the criticism was coming from family, where you should be able to feel accepted and supported unconditionally." His understanding of the deeper emotional dynamics involved was exactly what I needed in that moment. The pain hadn't been just about fashion criticism or social evaluation, but about feeling like I wasn't valued or respected by someone whose opinion should have mattered in positive rather than negative ways. "Do you think she'll actually change?" Michael asked, clearly curious about whether Emma's apology and commitment to do better would translate into different behavior in the future. "I hope so," I said honestly. The conversation tonight felt different from anything we've had before. She seemed genuinely shocked by the realization of how her behavior has been affecting me, and that level of self-awareness is probably necessary for real change. As we pulled into our driveway, I felt grateful for Michael's presence throughout the day and his intuitive understanding of the family dynamics that had been affecting me for so long. His support had made it possible for me to maintain my dignity and composure even during the most uncomfortable moments of the celebration. The following weeks brought gradual but noticeable changes in Emma's behavior. She called me a few days after the wedding to check in, not because she needed something or wanted to share dramatic news, but simply to maintain contact and continue rebuilding our relationship. The conversation was brief but warm, focused on how I was doing rather than on her own concerns or experiences. She also began making subtle but meaningful changes in how she talked about fashion, success, and personal choices during family gatherings. Instead of offering unsolicited advice about my appearance or lifestyle decisions, she would ask questions about my work and express genuine interest in my perspectives on various topics. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete, but it represented a fundamental shift in how Emma approached our relationship. she seemed to be making a conscious effort to relate to me as an equal, rather than as someone who needed her guidance or correction. David, meanwhile, threw himself into his work with renewed enthusiasm, clearly energized by the positive recognition he had received from his colleagues and supervisors at the wedding. His relationship with Michael remained professional, but warm, with occasional mentions of social plans that included both couples. The most significant change, however, was in my own attitude toward family gatherings and social situations involving Emma. The constant low-level anxiety about being judged or criticized had disappeared, replaced by a confidence that came from knowing that the truth about my circumstances was no longer hidden. The navy blue Target dress became something of a symbol for me, representing the importance of choosing authenticity over expensive performance. I wore it to several subsequent formal events, always feeling confident and appropriate regardless of what anyone else might think about its origins or cost. Looking back on that wedding day, I realized that sometimes the most important revelations come not from dramatic confrontations or carefully planned speeches, but from simple moments of truth that illuminate the reality beneath carefully constructed facades. Emma's wedding was supposed to be about celebrating love and commitment, but it ended up being about discovering the difference between genuine worth and the performance of status. The experience taught me that true elegance really does come from confidence and authenticity, rather than from price tags and brand names. More importantly, it showed me that family relationships can survive and even improve when built on truth and mutual respect rather than assumptions and competitive dynamics. Emma and David's marriage appears to be thriving, built on genuine affection and shared values rather than social positioning or material aspirations. Their relationship seems stronger for having navigated the complications that arose from misunderstood family dynamics and professional connections. As for my relationship with Emma, we continue to work on rebuilding trust and establishing new patterns of interaction based on respect rather than hierarchy. The process isn't always smooth, but it feels authentic in ways that our previous dynamic never did. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that cost us our illusions about ourselves and others. Emma's wedding taught both of us valuable truths about worth, respect, and the importance of treating people well, regardless of what we think we know about their circumstances. The $40 dress that started as a symbol of my supposed fashion shortcomings ended up representing something much more valuable: the confidence that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let others diminish your worth based on superficial judgments. The months following Emma's wedding brought changes that none of us could have anticipated. What began as a single moment of revelation at a wedding reception rippled outward, transforming not just my relationship with Emma, but the entire fabric of our family's interactions and understanding of each other. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected invitation from Emma to join her for lunch at a small cafe in German Village, far from the trendy spots in the short north where she usually preferred to meet. The location choice itself seemed symbolic of the changes she was trying to make, selecting a place known for its comfort and authenticity rather than its social cash or Instagram-worthy atmosphere. When I arrived, I found Emma already seated at a corner table, looking nervous but determined. She had dressed more casually than usual, wearing jeans and a simple sweater that looked expensive, but not ostentatiously so. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, presenting herself in a way that felt more genuine than the carefully curated image she had maintained for so long. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down, her voice carrying a vulnerability that I hadn't heard since we were children. "I know things have been awkward since the wedding, and I wanted to talk about where we go from here." The conversation that followed was unlike any we had ever had as adults. Emma spoke candidly about the period of self-reflection she had been going through since David's speech revealed the truth about my circumstances. She described lying awake at night, replaying years of interactions, seeing them now through the lens of understanding my actual position rather than the assumptions she had made about my life. "I keep thinking about all the times I offered to help you with your wardrobe," she said, wincing slightly at the memory. Or when I suggested you needed to understand the importance of presentation. I can't believe I was so condescending to someone who clearly had everything figured out already. She paused, stirring her coffee absently as she gathered her thoughts. But it's more than just the fashion comments. I think I've been competing with you for years without even realizing it. When I couldn't match your professional success, I convinced myself that I was superior in other ways. I made style and taste into a competition where I could feel like I was winning. The honesty was both painful and liberating. Emma was acknowledging patterns that had been affecting our relationship for years, but she was also demonstrating a level of self-awareness that suggested real change was possible. I've been seeing a therapist, she continued, looking directly at me for the first time since I had arrived. Someone who specializes in family dynamics and sibling relationships. She's helping me understand why I felt the need to establish hierarchies and compete instead of just being proud of your accomplishments. This revelation surprised me more than anything that had happened at the wedding. Emma had always been resistant to the idea of therapy, viewing it as an admission of weakness or failure. Her willingness to seek professional help suggested that she was genuinely committed to changing the patterns that had been damaging our relationship. What does she say about all of this? I asked, genuinely curious about the professional perspective on our family dynamics. Emma smiled ruefully. She says that siblings often develop complementary roles in families, and that sometimes those roles become so entrenched that we can't see each other clearly. I was so invested in being the stylish sister that I couldn't acknowledge your success in other areas. It threatened the identity I had built for myself. The explanation made sense of years of interactions that had often left me feeling confused and hurt. Emma's criticism hadn't really been about my fashion choices or lifestyle decisions. It had been about maintaining a sense of superiority in the one area where she felt confident. She also said that families often have unspoken rules about who gets to be successful in what ways, Emma continued. I think I was unconsciously trying to keep you in the practical but unfashionable category because it made me feel better about my own choices. We talked for over 2 hours, covering ground that we had never addressed directly in all our years as sisters. Emma asked thoughtful questions about my work, my relationship with Michael, and my experiences at family gatherings. She listened, without offering advice or judgment, simply trying to understand my perspective on our shared history. Toward the end of our conversation, Emma made a request that demonstrated how seriously she was taking this process of change. I want to make amends for the specific things I've said and done that hurt you. Not just a general apology, but acknowledgement of the actual impact of my behavior. Would you be willing to help me understand what that looked like from your perspective? The request was both generous and difficult. It meant revisiting painful memories and articulating the specific ways Emma's behavior had affected me. But it also represented an opportunity for genuine healing rather than just surface-level reconciliation. Over the following weeks, we had several more conversations where I shared specific examples of comments that had hurt me or situations where I had felt diminished by her behavior. Emma listened carefully, asking clarifying questions and taking notes in what appeared to be a journal dedicated to this process of self-improvement. Her responses were consistently thoughtful and genuinely remorseful. She didn't make excuses or try to minimize the impact of her words, but instead focused on understanding why those interactions had been hurtful and how she could behave differently in the future. The changes in Emma's behavior became apparent at our next family gathering, a casual barbecue at our parents' house to celebrate David's recent promotion at Henderson & Associates. Instead of arriving with fashion commentary or lifestyle advice, Emma complimented my garden-fresh salad and asked genuine questions about the herbs I had grown myself. When our cousin asked about my work, Emma actively encouraged the conversation, expressing interest in my recent projects and the challenges I was facing in my role. She didn't try to redirect attention to herself or offer unsolicited advice about career management. Instead, she seemed genuinely proud to have a sister with professional expertise and accomplishments. The most significant moment came when our mother mentioned that she had been thinking about updating her wardrobe for an upcoming anniversary celebration. In the past, Emma would have immediately positioned herself as the family fashion expert, offering to take mom shopping and selecting appropriate options based on her superior taste and knowledge. This time, Emma's response was completely different. "Mom, you should ask Jessica about that. She always looks so put together and professional. I bet she has great ideas about what would work for the kind of event you're planning." The suggestion was simple, but it represented a fundamental shift in family dynamics. Emma was deliberately stepping back from her self-appointed role as the style authority and instead recognizing my competence in areas where she had previously claimed superiority. Our mother looked surprised but pleased by the suggestion, and the conversation that followed was refreshingly free of the competitive undertones that had characterized similar discussions in the past. Emma participated by asking questions and offering supportive comments, but she didn't try to dominate or direct the conversation according to her own agenda. David's promotion celebration became an opportunity for our families to interact in new ways, with Emma and David hosting a small dinner party at their new apartment. The evening was relaxed and genuine, focused on conversation and connection, rather than the performance of sophistication that had characterized many of Emma's previous entertaining efforts. Emma had prepared a simple but delicious meal, choosing comfort over complexity in a way that felt authentic to her actual cooking skills and preferences. She served wine in everyday glasses rather than the expensive crystal she had received as wedding gifts, creating an atmosphere that prioritized comfort over formality. The conversation throughout the evening was substantive and wide-ranging, touching on topics from current events to shared memories to future plans. Emma asked thoughtful questions about Michael's work and expressed genuine interest in learning about the consulting industry. She shared stories about her own job at the boutique that focused on the interesting people she met and the skills she was developing rather than the expensive merchandise she had access to. Most importantly, Emma seemed comfortable with herself, in a way that I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't performing or competing or trying to establish her superiority in any particular area. She was simply being present and engaged as a sister, wife, and friend. The evening felt like a celebration not just of David's professional success, but of the new foundation our family relationships were being built on. The competitive dynamics that had characterized so many of our previous gatherings had been replaced by genuine support and mutual respect. As the months passed, the changes in Emma's behavior became increasingly natural and consistent. She would call me occasionally just to check in, without any particular agenda or crisis to discuss. She would share updates about her work and her marriage, but she would also ask about my life and listen attentively to my responses. The most meaningful change came when Emma began asking for my advice about professional situations, recognizing that my experience in corporate environments might be valuable as she considered her own career development. She was thinking about pursuing additional education or training that might help her advance beyond her current retail position, and she wanted my perspective on how to research options and make strategic decisions. These conversations represented a complete reversal of our previous dynamic. Instead of Emma positioning herself as the advisor offering guidance to her less sophisticated sister, she was acknowledging my expertise and seeking my input on important decisions. The shift felt natural rather than forced, suggesting that she was genuinely seeing me differently rather than just trying to correct her previous behavior. Emma's relationship with David also seemed to be evolving in positive ways. She was less focused on maintaining a perfect image and more comfortable with the authentic partnership they were building together. David appeared more relaxed and confident. In family settings, no longer walking on eggshells around Emma's social anxiety and need for constant validation. The success of David's career at Henderson & Associates continued to benefit from the positive relationship he had with Michael, but the professional connection remained appropriately separate from our family interactions. Michael was supportive of David's development without showing favoritism, and David was respectful of the boundaries between personal and professional relationships. One particularly meaningful moment came 6 months after the wedding, when Emma called me to share news about a promotion opportunity at a different boutique that would give her more responsibility and better compensation. Instead of the dramatic presentation style that had characterized her previous career updates, she shared the information straightforwardly and asked for my thoughts about the decision. "I know you have experience evaluating job opportunities and career moves," she said. "I was hoping you might help me think through the pros and cons of making this change." The conversation that followed was exactly the kind of sisterly support I had always hoped we could provide for each other. Emma shared her concerns about the new role, her excitement about the potential for growth, and her uncertainty about whether the timing was right for such a significant change. I was able to offer practical advice based on my own experience with career transitions, while also providing emotional support and encouragement. Emma listened carefully to my suggestions and asked thoughtful follow-up questions, treating my input as valuable rather than just politely acknowledging it before making her own decisions. The decision-making process became collaborative in a way that our previous interactions had never been. Emma ultimately decided to pursue the opportunity, but she did so with confidence that came from thoroughly considering all aspects of the situation rather than from impulsive excitement or social pressure. Her success in the new position was gratifying for the entire family, but especially meaningful for me because I had been able to contribute to her decision-making process in a constructive way. Emma excelled in her expanded role, bringing creativity and energy to her work while maintaining the professionalism and attention to detail that her new responsibilities required. The transformation in our relationship became most apparent during the holiday season, when our family gathered for the traditional celebrations that had often been sources of stress and competition in previous years. Emma arrived at these gatherings with gifts that were thoughtful rather than expensive, focusing on personal meaning rather than impressive presentation. She contributed to meal preparation and cleanup without drama or criticism of others' contributions. She engaged in conversations that were focused on connection rather than competition, asking questions about others' experiences and sharing her own updates without positioning herself as the center of attention. Most importantly, Emma seemed genuinely happy in a way that I hadn't seen since we were children. The constant anxiety about maintaining her image and establishing her superiority had been replaced by a contentment that came from authentic relationships and genuine accomplishment. The changes in Emma's behavior had ripple effects throughout our extended family. Our parents began relating to both of us more equally, no longer unconsciously reinforcing the dynamic where Emma needed special attention and protection, while I was expected to be self-sufficient and understanding. Our cousins and other relatives noticed the shift as well, commenting on how much more relaxed and enjoyable family gatherings had become. The competitive undercurrents that had characterized many of our previous celebrations had been replaced by a genuine spirit of mutual support and celebration. As I reflect on the year that followed Emma's wedding, I'm struck by how much can change when people are willing to examine their own behavior honestly and commit to genuine growth. Emma's transformation wasn't just about stopping negative behaviors. It was about developing a fundamentally different way of relating to me and to the world around her. The process wasn't always smooth or easy. There were moments when old patterns would resurface, particularly during stressful situations or when Emma was feeling insecure about her own choices. But her commitment to change was consistent, and she would acknowledge these lapses and work to correct them rather than defending or minimizing them. Michael observed these changes with interest and respect, commenting on how much more enjoyable family gatherings had become and how much happier I seemed in my relationship with Emma. He had never criticized Emma directly, but he had clearly noticed the stress that our previous dynamic had created for me. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the possibility of genuine change in family relationships. I had resigned myself to accepting Emma's behavior as an unchangeable aspect of our family dynamic, but her willingness to engage in serious self-reflection and make consistent efforts to improve proved that even long-standing patterns could be transformed. It also reinforced my belief in the importance of authenticity over performance. Emma's happiness and success in her new approach to life came from being genuine rather than from maintaining a carefully constructed image. The energy she had previously devoted to competing and establishing superiority was redirected toward building real relationships and pursuing meaningful goals. The navy blue Target dress that had become symbolic of this entire experience remained in my closet, still occasionally worn to formal events where I wanted to remind myself of the importance of choosing authenticity over others' expectations. It had become a talisman of sorts, representing the confidence that comes from knowing your own worth, regardless of others' opinions or assumptions. Looking back on that wedding day, I realized that sometimes the most profound changes come from the most unexpected moments. Emma's wedding was supposed to be about celebrating her marriage to David, but it ended up being the catalyst for a fundamental transformation in our family relationships and our understanding of what really matters in life. The experience taught both of us that true elegance and sophistication come from treating others with respect and kindness, not from expensive clothing or superior knowledge of fashion trends. It showed us that family relationships can be rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect and genuine support rather than competition and hierarchy. Most importantly, it demonstrated that people can change in meaningful ways when they're willing to examine their own behavior honestly and commit to doing better. Emma's transformation wasn't just about improving our relationship. It was about becoming the person she had always had the potential to be, but had been prevented from becoming by her own insecurities and competitive instincts. The journey from that moment of revelation at the wedding reception to the strong, supportive relationship Emma and I enjoy today has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my adult life. It has shown me that it's never too late to heal old wounds and build new patterns of interaction based on love, respect, and genuine understanding of each other's worth and potential. 2 years after Emma's wedding, the profound changes that began with David's innocent speech had evolved into something far more significant than any of us could have imagined. What started as a moment of social revelation had become a complete transformation of how our family understood success, worth, and the meaning of genuine support. The most unexpected development came when Emma decided to leave retail altogether and pursue a career in family counseling. Her own experience with therapy had been so transformative that she felt called to help other families navigate similar dynamics of competition, misunderstanding, and damaged relationships. She enrolled in a master's program in family therapy at Ohio State University, approaching her studies with the same intensity she had once brought to fashion and social positioning. But this time, her focus was entirely different. Instead of seeking external validation or competitive advantage, she was genuinely motivated by a desire to understand and help others work through the kinds of issues that had nearly destroyed our own relationship. The decision surprised everyone, including Emma herself. She had never expressed interest in psychology or counseling before, but her personal journey of self-discovery had revealed a natural aptitude for understanding complex emotional dynamics and helping people communicate more effectively. "I keep thinking about how close we came to losing each other permanently," she told me during one of our regular coffee meetings, which had become a cherished tradition. Not because we didn't love each other, but because we had gotten so trapped in patterns that prevented us from seeing each other clearly. If that can happen to sisters who grew up in the same house, imagine how many other families are struggling with similar issues. Her academic work was exceptional, combining rigorous theoretical study with deeply personal insights drawn from her own experience. Her professors were impressed by her ability to analyze family systems and communication patterns, but what really set her apart was her genuine empathy for people caught in destructive cycles they couldn't seem to break. Emma's thesis focused on sibling rivalry in adult families, examining how childhood roles and parental expectations could create lifelong patterns of competition and resentment. She interviewed dozens of families, documenting stories that echoed many aspects of our own experience while revealing the wide variety of ways these dynamics could manifest. The research process was emotional for Emma, as it required her to revisit and analyze the psychological factors that had shaped her own behavior for so many years. But it was also healing, providing her with a professional framework for understanding issues that had previously felt overwhelming and insurmountable. One particularly powerful interview involved a family where the successful older sister had been supporting her younger sibling financially for years, while the younger sister responded with resentment and criticism that masked her own feelings of inadequacy. The parallels to our own situation were striking, but Emma approached the case with professional objectivity while drawing on her personal experience to ask insightful questions. Listening to their story, I could see so clearly how the younger sister was using criticism as a defense mechanism against feeling like a failure, Emma explained to me after the interview. She was trying to establish some area where she could feel superior because she couldn't bear to acknowledge how much she needed help. It was exactly what I had been doing to you for years. The clinical training program required Emma to work with actual families under supervision, providing therapy services while developing her skills as a professional counselor. Her supervisors consistently praised her ability to identify underlying family dynamics and help clients recognize patterns they had been unable to see themselves. One of her first cases involved a mother and adult daughter who had been locked in conflict over the daughter's career choices and lifestyle decisions. The mother genuinely believed she was being helpful by offering constant advice and criticism, while the daughter felt undermined and disrespected by what she perceived as invasive judgment. Emma's approach to the case was informed by her own experience of learning to step back from the advisor role and instead focus on offering support without direction. She helped the mother understand how her well-intentioned guidance was actually damaging their relationship, while also helping the daughter recognize her mother's genuine love and concern beneath the problematic delivery. The breakthrough came when Emma guided them through a conversation where each person could express their actual feelings without trying to change or fix the other person. The mother was able to share her fears about her daughter's future and her desire to help, while the daughter could explain how the constant advice made her feel incompetent and judged. It was like watching our own transformation happen again, but with different people, Emma told me excitedly after the successful session. Once they could hear each other's actual intentions instead of just reacting to the surface behavior, everything shifted. They remembered how much they loved each other. Emma's success as a therapist was gratifying to witness, but it also represented something deeper about the kind of person she had become. The competitive instincts that had once driven her to establish superiority over others had been transformed into a genuine desire to help people understand and support each other more effectively. Her new career path also brought unexpected benefits to our own relationship. Emma's professional training in communication and conflict resolution made her even more skilled at maintaining the healthy boundaries and patterns we had worked so hard to establish. She could recognize when old habits were starting to resurface and address them directly before they became problematic. More importantly, her work with other families provided constant reinforcement of the lessons she had learned about the importance of authentic relationships. Every day, she witnessed the damage that could result from competition, criticism, and misunderstanding between people who genuinely loved each other but didn't know how to express it constructively. David's career continued to flourish at Henderson and Associates, where his combination of technical expertise and genuine integrity had made him a valued member of the leadership team. Michael had been impressed by David's work ethic and problem-solving abilities, but their professional relationship remained appropriately separate from family connections. The success of David's career had provided financial stability that allowed Emma to pursue her graduate studies without the stress of immediate economic pressure. But more importantly, It had given her the confidence to take risks and pursue meaningful work rather than just focusing on jobs that provided immediate income or social status. Emma and David's marriage had strengthened considerably during this period of personal growth and professional development. David was incredibly supportive of Emma's career change, even though it meant temporary financial sacrifice and significant demands on their time and energy. He seemed to understand that Emma's personal transformation was benefiting all aspects of their life together. Their relationship dynamic had evolved from the somewhat unbalanced pattern of their early courtship, where Emma had been performing sophistication while David struggled to keep up with her social expectations. Now they functioned as genuine partners, each bringing different strengths to their shared goals and supporting each other's individual development. David had also benefited from Emma's growing expertise in communication and relationship dynamics. He became more confident in social situations and more skilled at expressing his own needs and preferences rather than just deferring to Emma's stronger personality. Their conversations were more balanced and substantive, focused on shared decision-making, rather than Emma's agenda dominating their choices. The changes in Emma's career and personal development had ripple effects throughout our extended family. Our parents were initially surprised by her decision to leave retail and pursue graduate education, but they quickly became proud supporters of her academic achievements and professional goals. More importantly, they began to recognize how their own parenting approach had contributed to the competitive dynamics between Emma and me. They started making conscious efforts to treat us more equally, avoiding the patterns of differential attention and expectation that had shaped our childhood relationship. Our mother, in particular, began asking both Emma and me for advice on various topics, rather than automatically assuming that Emma was the expert on style and social matters while I was the practical problem solver. She started recognizing that both of us had developed expertise in different areas and that our perspectives could be valuable in different ways. Our father became more intentional about acknowledging both of our professional accomplishments and personal growth. He would ask specific questions about Emma's studies and my work projects, showing genuine interest in our respective fields rather than just offering general encouragement. These changes in our parents' behavior were subtle but meaningful, representing their own recognition that the family dynamics needed to evolve as we all grew and changed. They seemed to understand that their role was to support both daughters' development rather than managing our relationship with each other. The most significant test of our transformed family dynamic came when Emma and David announced that they were expecting their first child. The news was exciting for everyone, but it also brought up questions about how the new generation would be raised and what values would be emphasized as the family expanded. Emma's approach to pregnancy and preparing for parenthood was completely different from what I might have expected based on her previous personality. Instead of focusing on expensive baby gear or creating the perfect nursery aesthetic, she was primarily concerned with understanding child development and creating a healthy emotional environment for her future child. She read extensively about child psychology and family dynamics, applying her professional training to her personal situation. She and David had thoughtful conversations about their own childhood experiences and how they wanted to parent differently, avoiding the patterns that had created competition and insecurity in their own families. I keep thinking about how we want this baby to grow up feeling secure and valued for who they are, not for how they compare to other people, Emma shared with me during one of our conversations about her pregnancy. I want to be the kind of mother who celebrates her child's authentic self rather than trying to shape them into some idealized version of success. The perspective was so different from the competitive, appearance-focused values that had dominated Emma's thinking for most of her adult life. Her transformation seemed complete and genuine, rooted in deep self-awareness rather than temporary behavioral changes. Emma asked me to be the baby's godmother, a request that felt deeply meaningful given the history of our relationship and the work we had both done to rebuild it on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. The role represented not just family connection, but recognition of the person I had always been beneath the surface judgments and misunderstandings. The baby shower Emma planned was a reflection of her new values and priorities. Instead of an elaborate social event designed to impress guests with expensive decorations and luxury items, she organized a simple gathering focused on celebrating the upcoming arrival and sharing practical advice about parenting. The guest list included family members, close friends, and several of the families Emma had worked with during her clinical training. The mix of people created an atmosphere that was warm and genuine, with conversations focused on the meaningful aspects of parenthood rather than competitive displays of knowledge or resources. Emma's approach to gift-giving and receiving was also completely transformed. She genuinely appreciated practical items that would be useful for caring for the baby, rather than focusing on brands or status symbols. She expressed gratitude for handmade items and thoughtful gestures with the same enthusiasm as expensive purchases. The transformation was so complete that some of Emma's old friends from her boutique days seemed confused by her new priorities and interests. She had naturally grown apart from relationships that were primarily based on shared materialism and social climbing, while developing deeper connections with people who valued authenticity and personal growth. When Emma's daughter was born, she and David named her Grace, a choice that seemed to reflect everything Emma had learned about the importance of accepting people as they are, rather than trying to change them to meet external expectations. The name also seemed to acknowledge the grace that had been extended to Emma during her own process of transformation and growth. Emma's approach to motherhood was informed by her professional training and personal experience in ways that were beautiful to witness. She was attentive and loving without being anxious or controlling. She celebrated Grace's individual personality traits and developmental milestones without comparing her to other babies or worrying about whether she was meeting arbitrary standards. Most importantly, Emma seemed to genuinely enjoy being a mother in a way that felt authentic and fulfilling. She wasn't performing motherhood for social media or competitive comparison with other parents. She was simply delighting in her relationship with her daughter and the opportunity to provide the kind of unconditional love and support she had learned to value so highly. The experience of watching Emma navigate early motherhood reinforced my confidence in the authenticity of her transformation. The patience, empathy, and genuine focus on her child's well-being that she demonstrated consistently showed that her changes went far deeper than surface behavioral modifications. My own relationship with baby Grace was also meaningful in unexpected ways. Being her godmother allowed me to participate in her development and care, while also observing the healthy family dynamic that Emma and David had created. Grace was growing up in an environment where she was valued for her authentic self, where adults communicated respectfully with each other, and where love was expressed through genuine support rather than competitive performance. The contrast with our own childhood was striking, but not bitter. Instead, it felt like evidence of growth and healing, proof that patterns could be broken and that future generations could benefit from the work previous generations had done to understand and improve family relationships. As Grace grew from infant to toddler, she exhibited a confidence and security that seemed to reflect the healthy environment Emma and David had created. She was curious and outgoing without being demanding, affectionate without being clingy, and independent without being defiant. The secure attachment she had formed with her parents provided a foundation for healthy relationships throughout her life. Emma's professional work continued to evolve as she gained experience and developed her expertise in family therapy. She specialized in working with siblings and extended families, helping them navigate the complex dynamics that could create lasting damage or profound healing depending on how they were addressed. Her reputation grew within the professional community, and she began receiving referrals from other therapists who recognized her particular skill in helping families break destructive cycles and establish healthier patterns of interaction. She also began speaking at professional conferences, sharing insights drawn from both her clinical work and her personal experience of family transformation. One of Emma's most impactful presentations focused on the role of assumptions and stereotypes in family dysfunction. She discussed how family members often develop fixed ideas about each other's capabilities, motivations, and worth, and how these assumptions could prevent them from seeing each other clearly or supporting each other effectively. "We think we know our family members better than anyone else," Emma would tell her audiences. "But sometimes that familiarity can blind us to who they really are and what they're actually capable of achieving. The most profound healing often comes from being willing to question our assumptions and see our loved ones with fresh eyes." The presentation always resonated deeply with her audiences, many of whom recognized similar patterns in their own families or in the families they worked with professionally. Emma's ability to combine theoretical knowledge with genuine personal insight made her a compelling speaker and an effective therapist. The success of Emma's professional work was gratifying, but the most meaningful measure of her transformation was the quality of her relationships with the people she loved. Her marriage to David continued to strengthen and deepen. Her relationship with Grace was joyful and secure, and her connection with our extended family was characterized by mutual respect and genuine affection. Our own relationship had evolved into something I had never imagined possible during the years of competition and criticism. Emma had become not just a sister I loved, but a person I genuinely respected and enjoyed spending time with. Our conversations were substantive and engaging, our shared activities were fun and meaningful, and our mutual support was authentic and reliable. The transformation felt complete, but not static. Emma continued to grow and develop as a person, always working to become more skilled at her profession and more effective in her relationships. But the fundamental shift in her values and priorities had created a stable foundation for continued positive change. Looking back on the journey from that moment of revelation at Emma's wedding to the strong, healthy relationship we enjoyed years later, I was struck by the power of truth to transform even the most entrenched patterns of behavior. Emma's willingness to face uncomfortable realities about herself and commit to meaningful change had not only saved our relationship, but had created something far better than what we had lost. The navy blue Target dress that had started this entire journey still hung in my closet, though it was now joined by many other pieces that reflected my growing confidence in my own taste and judgment. The dress had become a symbol not just of that specific moment of vindication, but of the broader principle that authenticity and self-respect were more valuable than external validation or expensive performance. The lessons learned from Emma's wedding and its aftermath had influenced many other aspects of my life as well. I was more confident in professional situations, more selective about relationships, and more committed to being genuine rather than trying to meet others' expectations about who I should be or how I should present myself. Michael and I had also benefited from the family transformation, as the reduced stress and improved relationships had created more space for us to focus on our own goals and happiness. We had purchased a larger home with a beautiful garden, traveled to places we had always wanted to see, and deepened our own relationship without the constant undercurrent of family drama. The experience had taught me that family relationships could be healed and transformed even when they seemed permanently damaged. It had shown me that people could change in fundamental ways when they were willing to do the difficult work of self-examination and growth. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that love expressed through authentic support and respect was far more powerful than love expressed through competition and control. Emma's wedding had been intended as a celebration of love and commitment, but it had become something far more significant. The beginning of a journey toward understanding what those concepts actually meant and how they could be lived out in daily relationships with the people who mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.